Welcome to Virtual for Real, the Rapid Pipeline podcast. I'm Max, your host, and today I have with me the amazing Michael Tanzillo from Adobe. Michael, so great to have you here.
It's so great to talk to you, Max. Yes, I'm very excited to be here.
Yeah, I'm really looking forward to this conversation. And let's start maybe by having a small introduction. I think you had a really interesting journey coming from more like games and VFX side of things and then moving into 3D for enterprises. And after all, like we're talking about digital twins here, right? We're really interested in that. But then many people of our audience are also 3D artists, I think, right? That are coming from this games background and more from that side of things, entertainment. So it's really interesting to see how we can build bridges between both of these worlds, find a common language, and like you have a very interesting journey there. So if you like, maybe you can tell us a bit more about your journey in 3D and what brought you to digital twins.
Sure, absolutely. I'll keep it short because the older I get, I realize my intro story gets longer and longer. But yeah, so I started in 3D in the early 2000s. I was toying around with it as an artist. I was a photography major in college, and I thought I was going to be a photographer. And then I started doing some 3D imaging, which led to a few things. And I got very interested in animated films, and I didn't know that was a job you could. I didn't know that being an artist on an animated film was like a real job that real people had until I watched Finding Nemo. And then I watched this behind the scenes footage, and they showed these artists going scuba diving off the coast of Australia and defining the look of the film and like matching the way that the ocean looked to the emotional beats of the film. So it'd be like in open ocean when everything was happy, the water was very clear and blue. And then as they got closer to Sydney and the drama raised, the water was more greenish and darker and murkier. And I was like, oh, this is exactly what I want to do. And so I went back to graduate school and studied lighting, which again tied back to my photography roots. And after graduate school at the Savannah College of Art and Design, I went to work at a company called Blue Sky Studios. They made the Ice Age movies and Horton Hears a Who and the Robots movie prior to me getting there. I started as a lighting technical assistant, which was a fancy way of saying render wrangler. I just made sure the air conditioning was on in the render room, and I pieced together bad renders and figured out why renders were failing and did some very menial technical tasks. And but I was able to work my way up and build some trust. And so I started lighting on Ice Age 3. And so I spent 13 years there lighting on 10 animated films. And I worked my way up through the lighting department. And then in my last 2 years there, I became the head of training. So we were switching pipelines, and I'd been teaching for a while and doing some things on the side. I wrote a book on lighting. So I've been doing a lot of education on the side. And that led into this role of kind of working on getting the studio to transition to a new pipeline. So that was when my obsession started with workflows and how to tie things together and make people work more efficiently. And then in 2021, the Disney shut down Blue Sky Studios. So the studio closed, and I was looking for something new. I had a friend, a guy named Alwyn Hunt, who worked at Adobe, reached out and he said Adobe purchased the Substance team, the Logarithmic team, and there's a 6-month gig open for a demo artist. You should apply. And I was like, oh, this is great. I can talk to more gaming studios and visual effects companies and animation studios. Like all of my connections just also got laid off. So I don't really have any connections out there. And so I did that, and I got into working on the Substance team. And I thought, again, like I would be talking to all these different entertainment companies. And I got in and I realized that's not who I'm talking to at all. I'm talking to footwear designers and fashion designers and product visualization and architecture. And I got to work with NASA, which was a dream come true. And
Wow.
that was very cool. But like I realized that because I'd been so sheltered in the entertainment space for so long, that when I got to Adobe and started seeing all these different customers and all the different ways that people are utilizing 3D, both in visualization and like the marketing side, but also in the design side. And I just became fascinated with it because it was, and at the same time, the entertainment industry was under turmoil. There were so many job layoffs and closures and people looking for work. And so I started over the last few years trying to connect the dots between the people who are so talented and so smart in the entertainment space and have so much 3D knowledge, but think of 3D as being this thing that's a pixel that goes on the screen to entertain people, be it a video game or a film. But really, it can be for digital twin usage that we've talked about, like creating these digital representations of real world products that can be used in so many different ways, from design to marketing to, yeah, we can get into it. But so it's really been my goal the last few years to try and connect these things in different ways, like making the people in these that are using digital twins aware of different workflows, aware of, oh, you can do simulations in Houdini, or you can do these other things in other places. Meanwhile, making sure that the 3D artists that came up wanting to work on video games aware that there's this whole other world that's available to them, that if they want to help make car configurators and things, that's all at their fingertips as well.
That's amazing. And I think there are many artists listening now who can totally relate to this. And for a fact, like one of my co-founders, for example, went to this art school like in Dieburg here that has an international program, animation game design, and a couple of my colleagues are like have been in that program. And when you get into 3D as a tech art topic, I even did that myself. Like when I started programming my first experimental little games, I like opened up Blender and I tried to create some assets, and I was like, oh, this is fun, this is really cool. And sure, like you're not first thinking about digital twins of products, I think, right? You're thinking about what can I do with this cool skill and do something creative. But then it's really amazing to see how that can be applied in so many industries. And it's also a really fascinating journey, like what you just described, like coming from photography. Is that maybe a full circle to virtual photography even?
Yeah, absolutely. So it's also a funny thing because when I was studying photography, it was all darkroom techniques. It was all because I loved it because it was both artistry, but also kind of a bit of chemistry because you were mixing chemicals in a certain way, and you had to take the temperature, and that changed how much time. But there was also an artistic craft to it. And actually, I was doing that when Photoshop first became more popular and got on my radar, and I was like, I'm never going to use this. I'm a darkroom photographer. This can never replace what I do. I'm never using this Adobe thing. And now I'm 25 years later, I'm the head of 3D tech artist at Adobe. So here we go. And that was the other part of it too, is as I've worked more at Adobe and I've taken on this role of being in charge of this global team, I'm seeing how digital twins are used effectively to communicate with all the different manufacturing centers versus the design centers, with all these different teams all over the world. So it's really I got my slow entry into the digital twin world, but now I'm like fully immersed in it. So I think that I'm happy to be here.
Amazing. Yeah. And thanks also for creating this community, right? I think you hinted to it, but just to mention it to everyone who doesn't know, Michael is running this amazing community that's called the 3D Artist. Yeah. So if you look for the 3D Artist and Michael Tanzillo, I think you will find it. It's a blog. And if I get it correctly, Michael, it's really targeting also that audience, right? Of like artists who are looking to understand what can I do outside of media and entertainment, right? With my 3D art skills and like the working with tools I love and like with 3D, right?
Yeah, it's like the newsletter is really evolved over time when I started it because I'd written, like I mentioned before, I'd written a book about lighting on animated films because that was what I did for a long time. And I know and I think because that's the way I process things is I like to lay them out and write them. And I was like, I should write a book about working in 3D outside of entertainment. And then I remembered how hard it was to write a book and how it took me like 18 months and with my co-writer. And I had a co-writer at the time, this wonderful artist named Jasmine Katatakarn. And I was like, oh, it's too much. I was like, you know what? And I was like, I didn't have the publisher funding it. So I was like, how do I do this? And I was like, oh, I'll just start writing a newsletter with just my ideas to get them out. And then it's really evolved over time into, because I talked about everything at first, but now it's really honed in on helping 3D people in whatever industry you're in to understand what's going on in the other 3D worlds. Because being a 3D designer in fashion is very different than product visualization, is very different than this. And actually, SIGGRAPH this year, my same co-author challenged me again because I was hosting these panels and talking to people and giving presentations about working outside. And she was saying, you've laid out everything in these general broad strokes, but like people need actionable items. And I came back and I really thought about that. So now I'm working on putting together what I'm calling guides. I spent 2 months working on different articles around product visualization. And then I put together this ultimate guide, which I will eventually revisit because I don't think it's quite done yet. But now I'm working on fashion and I'm just going to go through the different industries, write specific articles, and then at the end, round it all up. So it's if you want to work in these spaces, these are the softwares you should be aware of. These are the workflows you should be aware of. These are the challenges these industries face, laying it out for people in a very practical, actionable way.
That's great. Hey, thank you so much. And I think that is pretty much on spot also with what we're trying to figure out here in the podcast, right? Like digital twins, how can we leverage the value of those for the real world, for the benefit of the real world, and looking at also what is being done in the enterprise context with 3D digital twins, You mentioned fashion already. I guess there are a couple other industries. Are there some that catch your particular interest where you say, look, in fashion, there's a lot happening right now, but maybe there are also others like different consumer products, electronics, or is it all over the place? Because 3D and product design is so versatile, right? We can make a digital twin of almost anything.
Yeah, I think fashion is definitely an interesting one because they're a little all over the place right now. But for me, if I really wanted to dive into one, it would be really simple consumer packaging, like
Mhm.
CPG and just like simple product visualization, maybe some electronics, because I just think that because with fashion, there's some real challenges of draping and simulation and understanding the physics and making sure that there's a lot of like soft good challenges and also some existing workflows that I find that are just a deeper challenge. But for me, like I think that I talk to companies that make just simple products. Again, from the 3D side, it's oh wait, that's just a bottle with a label on it. And it's like these companies are
Right.
working with and these companies are spending just unbelievable amounts of money to make the visualizations for those. And also the requirements for those companies is so high. I was just talking to I was listening to a podcast the other day where somebody from an agency was saying these product companies are now using AI tools for their marketing, which means they just throw every image they have of a product at a certain region and then allow AI to sort out which images are most effective in that area. But the thing is, like, that means that they're asking for every image that could possibly be on a product, and these companies they need to produce that. And I just think that there's so many scalable workflows you could develop. There's automation solutions. And also just like tying together the whole process from the CAD model, from the industrial design into the design of the product, then using that digital twin there into the visualization. And we were talking a little bit about this before about I would really love to help companies build like this ultimate digital twin of their product that not only is the visual representation but also contains a metadata of all the everything that goes into the creation of that. So like how much does it weigh? How much, of each material does it use? What's the environmental impact of all this stuff? So every design change that you make to it can filter through the whole process and you can see the ramifications if the lid of this bottle is this type of plastic versus this type of metal. You're like, oh, it raises it by 3 ounces, which makes the shipping more expensive, whatever the case may be. Or we're seeing a lot of companies use it to determine how products should be displayed on their shelves. Or another one is to putting products into a store and then allowing customers to put on a VR headset and walk through that store and doing analytics on what they're looking at, how they're interacting with
Mhm.
things. It's not a one-to-one comparison of how they would be in the actual store, but it's pretty interesting. So if it was me, if I wasn't at my job now and I got fired
Mhm.
tomorrow, I would dive deep into product visualization workflows because I think that there's so many interesting secondary benefits of having a digital twin in that space that I think could be really fun and impactful.
Yeah, that makes perfect sense. And I think we've seen workflows like digital B2B showrooms, for example, especially during COVID, that became big, but then it never really went away. Like people are still
Mhm.
using those and are expanding those, in fact, in some areas. And there are just so many ways like how we can leverage digital twins. I think one critical point is always the creation of a photorealistic digital twin, right? In marketing, there are so many ways how you could do it. When you already have a ready-made product, you could start by taking pictures of it and or scanning it or like using a CAD model and applying materials on it and so on. But then, as you said, in product design, we start usually already more and more with the 3D design process, right? So instead of, let's say I'm in fashion, instead of using, I don't know, like some 2D tooling to draw a cutting pattern and sewing pattern and then basically creating a piece of cloth that has this shape and then evaluating it. People are just using tools like Clo or Browseware, right? And doing it all in 3D. And I think the same is already true in other industries for many years. Maybe not so much in CPG, I don't know, but let's say, I don't know, like in electronics or anything where you start with a CAD model that are more like CAD native. I guess these models exist, but still there, I think there's often a disconnect. Could that be between like the product design world and the marketing world? So that let's say the one hand of the enterprise, the product design world, has created a beautiful model that then the engineering modifies that. And in that process, while they're making it ready to manufacture, all the material info and all that good stuff is lost. And so the marketers have this model and they can't use it and they have to like again deal with, oh, do I scan it or do I really go through this effort?
Yes,
And
yeah, absolutely. I joke that, everything is so software specific. Everything's so software dominant today. It's very, how is AI going to impact the industry? How is these tools? And you talk to these companies like, okay, what tool does this? What tool does that? And you obviously, my job is to help them piece together workflows out of software. But for me, if I could snap my fingers and change one thing, it wouldn't be a better software. It'd be better communication within the companies. It would be better workflows and passing assets from point A to point B. And because companies are so siloed, it's so much just, okay, this team does this and then they deliver that. And then that, yeah, there's so much of it is, I'll talk to a company and be like, okay, so their industrial design team made the CAD file. Great. And then they sent that to the manufacturer. Great. And then they use that to produce the thing. Awesome. Okay. And then you all are designing the CMF design, the color, material, and finish. It's okay. What are you using? Oh, you rebuilt a 3D model and now you've got that in Keyshot. Okay, cool. Okay. And then there's the marketing team. What do you, wait, so you rebuild the model in Blender, and then you're like, wait a second, what's going on? Like, why are we building the model 3 times? And every single, and it's, nobody's doing a bad job. It's just, there's not a pipeline for them to communicate. Oftentimes these teams are in different parts of the world. And it's just, this is just always the way that it's been done, because traditionally these have been very isolated activities. Manufacturing is very different than is different than the design process, which is different than the marketing. Because usually it's like you prototype it and then manufacture it, and then you get it, and then you photograph it and you send those out. But it's like we can like getting companies to understand that we can tie all these things together. And I think a big misconception for me, especially when I was moving into the enterprise space, was you'll hear about these aha, I call them like the iPhone moments, where iPhone gets released and customers get their hands on an iPhone. All of a sudden they start acting differently, and there is this like moment. But for enterprise customers, they move pretty slowly. Like there's never gonna be a flip of a switch. Everybody changes to this new thing, because it's like there's a lot of processes in place. It's like turning a large ship. It's interesting. It's very interesting to me. It's changing culture and changing historical processes is far harder than getting someone to learn a new software.
I can totally relate. And we had an amazing conversation with Adobe colleague Jonathan Beals, also on the podcast. We're diving specifically into the role of the middle management and how they're going to pickle when they want to like introduce changes, like to introduce digital twins, because you need to leverage them across the value chain to really get the best value. But then what I was thinking is maybe just a quick thought, and like super curious to your feedback, is wouldn't maybe the missing piece be more of an incentive for people to work together that's right now missing? Because if I'm a product designer, right, my job is to create a design that is maybe, I don't know, a PowerPoint handover with Rhino files and some whatever keyshot scene and pretty renderings, but then the engineer's job is to make that manufacturable, right? And it's, I don't know, you have a watch and they say, yeah, but we need more space for the battery, or this needs to be closer to that, and whatever. And they move stuff around. And so they change that model, but do they have an incentive to keep the materials and everything up to date, right? I don't think so. So why should they spend more time when they are anyway stressed? So like, how can we create incentives for people that they want to work together like that?
That is a brilliant take on it, because I wholeheartedly agree. I've seen this across my career, because even when I worked on film, the siloed process at the time, it was very much, okay, you are the animator, you animate the shot, then you pass it off, and then somebody else adds the materials to the character, and somebody else does the effects. I did the lighting. And one of the pass offs that we had is, this is during the era where every film had a 3D release, a stereoscopic release.
Remember.
Yeah, and so for us, we would work on the shot of the film, and we call it mono, where you're just looking at the one frame. And then after you finalized what that looked like, then you rendered the same exact shot from a camera that was slightly shifted to the side, to the left. And then the stereoscopic team would look at it. And oftentimes what you did to get the one still image to look really good didn't work when you shifted the camera over a little bit, because sometimes you did a 2D fix on something, and they would always get mad and say, you can't do it this way. And it was, guys, I've got my deadlines. I've got to get this done. Right. I don't have any incentive. And then there were a couple shots where I had to do it in stereo too. And I was like, oh, now that was my incentive. Oh, I see why. I say it's like, how do you motivate people? Yeah, because this happened with a fashion designer. She was saying designed in Clove for a while. And the way that Clo works is it's all just meant for the design team for the most part. It's not meant for the marketing side. And it works great for that. And their company was like, oh, we would like to use what you build in Clo for 3D renders. And she was like, great. And she was working on this skirt, and the skirt had all these layers on the inside that she wasn't necessarily visualizing in the early design. And she was like, so they're telling me they want to use this. It requires another week of work for me, but they're not building a week into my budget to do it. So I have to do more with the same amount of time. And so she was like, yeah. So I think the motivation to get people to work together, I don't have an answer to that. I wish I did, because that would be great to figure out how to get people to work together more fluidly.
Yeah, probably a topic for another episode, or like definitely something to think about. And maybe transitioning to slightly different topic that probably interests everyone also. Like when we look at AI, right? I think like my thesis is coming from the conversation where we were now, that you have all the siloing and these problems that like people could just hand over something from one department to another, but it's extra effort. And then sometimes AI is also called in as the savior or as a band-aid, maybe, right? To like institutional problems. Yeah, I know this cat stuff exists, but what if I can just tell a chat program to give me a picture? Wouldn't that be great? And then millions are spent on initiatives that try to make that work. And then a year later, everyone's disappointed that it doesn't. But all jokes aside, I think there are also very interesting things happening with AI in marketing, right? Like I looked at Adobe Firefly and like how it can basically fill in backgrounds and contextualize things, for example. I mean, you mentioned this example earlier of marketers trying to find a good like set of images, right, for a certain region. So I was asking myself, could that maybe be something that Firefly could help with in the future, that you don't even need to build everything, but it's okay, the background and context I can just generate with a prompt, and then I have a target for exactly that audience that I want to show this image to, if that makes sense. Or like, how do you see that? AI in general,
Yeah.
and then also the interplay with 3D. Do we still need 3D at all? Is it all going to be just AI next couple of years?
That's a great question. And that's a question that companies have been asking for the last couple of years. And the answer is pretty resounding. The majority of my work this year, because I think the majority of my work this year has been helping companies as they've tried to do too much in AI and realizing the limitations of it. Because what happened was is there were any company, open LinkedIn, there's any company with a fancy demo reel that shows you that you can do all of your product visualization with AI. But the reality is that the companies will try this and they'll upload all these images of their existing products or their existing marketing content and try and use that as to drive the AI engine to make new stuff. But ultimately, AI, what it's good at, its feature is that it takes data and generates new data from existing data, or new things from existing things. That's awful for a product, because that means manipulating the label, manipulating the color, manipulating the bottle shape, and from an outsider's perspective, from somebody who's developing these software, they might look at that and go, "Oh, that looks like X company's soda can," but the company looks at it and goes, "That's not right. That's not our color. That's not the way our logo actually looks." And that type of discrepancy between what is on the screen and what is real is so huge for a company. And it's important for their branding and their brand identity, but it's actually like a real problem. It's like, because if you're looking online at something and what you're seeing isn't what you get, your likelihood of returning that product is very high. And so what they want is I hear this over and over again. How do we ensure that our product is pixel perfect while leveraging the speed and scale that AI offers? And the answer is a digital twin. That's the only answer for it. And so it's so funny because companies almost have to be burned by AI before they really get it. Because if you show it to them, they're like, yeah, that's cool. But in 2 or 3 years, the AI is just getting better and better. And I was like, but AI is always going to hallucinate. No, it's not going to, that's not how it works. Yeah. So I think the future of 3D in terms of product visualization in this type of world is that you will use 3D to make the pixel perfect representation of your product that looks exactly right from every angle, and then use AI to fill out the space around it, to put it in different situations, different regions with different stuff around it. And at Adobe, we have a really great workflow inside this tool, Substance Stager, where you can actually, you have your digital twin, it's there, it's perfect, but then you can actually use 3D objects to compose the scene around it. So you can put anything from just like cubes and spheres and cylinders to actual other 3D models of a palm tree, or there's a text to 3D model, which again, like the 3D models that it generates aren't super great, but they're really good for driving AI imagery. So what I like to do is, okay, so I've got, again, that company soda can, it's pixel perfect. They lime flavor, let's put it on a beach. And then you could say where the palm tree is, you can say where these things are. And then you can let AI do its thing. And you can keep those, even if you wanted to, you can keep those pretty general and just say, this is the composition, this is the layout that I want. And then use AI to fill in the gaps. Because and the other part of it is, honestly, for companies, as long as the AI is commercially safe, it's actually better in some instances. This was one where it was a company that sells like laptop computers, and they wanted to show that it works really well in a college dorm room setting. In a college dorm room, there's branded backpacks and branded books and like everything is a real thing. So you have to get like permission to use all that stuff in a photo shoot, or you have to be careful with all that. But with AI, it's none of it's real. So you don't have to worry about using a Patagonia backpack in it or something like that. Like it can be very generic. So.
That makes perfect sense. And it's fun because it relates to what you said earlier. Like you want the product to look perfect. Yes, the product that's in focus, but everything around it, it can look like an average product, right? They're like literally average in the sense of maybe it was trained with imagery that contained Patagonia backpacks, but it's not going to look exactly like a Patagonia backpack. It's not going to have that logo on it, and so on.
Yeah, that's my easy way of saying that is use 3D for the stuff that you care about and use AI for the stuff that you don't. Because again, the thing that I think a lot of people miss about the opportunity of all this is they say, like, that beach background, wouldn't that have been something that a 3D artist would have done? And I was like, no, that's just a thing the company wouldn't have done before because it was too complex. They're not gonna do some sand simulation and hire a modeler to build just a palm tree for this one shot or something. Like they're not gonna do any. They're just gonna say no, it's too complicated, and just not do any of it. And then just slap a 2D, they'll just Photoshop it, and it'll take too long and be too complex, and the shadows won't look right. So and the reflections won't look right. That's just what it would be like. I think the concern over AI replacing stuff, especially in this space, is it's. And the other thing I tell people too, because then the concern is like, does it replace photography? And I was like, no, it just allows photography to do the stuff that photography and video does well, because because everyone's, oh, we make 10, let's say we make 10,000 images a year. If we use AI and we use these other faster workflows, then we get to that 10,000 number faster. And I always say, no company that, okay, the amount of images that we create today is exactly what we want. If you can make faster, they're going to ask for more. So there's just going to be more like content, because right now the limit is just the amount that we can create. I was saying this again, not to take it back to animated films again, but the way that the technology was when I started was like you could probably release a film like once every 2 years. But then as technology got faster, the render engines got more, the hardware got better. It's like you could render things a little faster. So that timeline moved up. Now it's every 18 months. Now I think you can probably do one in a year. Like you can release a film in a year. It's like people always worry about the supply changes that AI does, but the demand change is even higher because of all this stuff. So I'm not worried about the replacement of AI in creative workflows. There's just going to be more images that are needed, and now video and 3D assets and the whole thing. So yeah.
Perfect. That's a very encouraging outlook, and that makes perfect sense to me as well.
I'll also give one more little bit of encouragement too, is that I think that especially for like fashion, one of the areas of interest that I see a lot is these gaming environments, because they're starting to see how much money people are willing to invest in, like with their Roblox characters or their Fortnite character or whatever, like all that stuff. But there's going to be a tipping point at some point where it's, and like maybe it's the adoption of VR headsets, but somebody said this to me, we don't know when it's going to happen, we don't know exactly what it's going to look like, but there's going to be a point where the internet has the access, and there's going to be like more immersive like things, and no matter what it is, it's going to require 3D objects. There's no way around it, and so we're going to be, whatever the gold rush is of whatever the immersive world is, and we're gonna be the ones selling the shovels because we're gonna be the ones that can create the 3D assets. So I think I'm not I'm not worried at all about the future state of 3D. Now, I'm not saying I've never been wrong before, but I think for me, it's just like there's too many avenues for 3D technology to really take off in the next 5, 10, 20 years.
That makes perfect sense to me. And I think we already learned about so many amazing benefits that we get from digital twins if they are done, if we can establish them across companies. And I think this will just happen, like you said, from impossible to inevitable at some point. So yeah, optimistic here as well.
I love that term, impossible to inevitable. I'm going to steal that. That's good.
I stole it myself, honestly, from someone who tries to make Euro less bureaucratic by proposing something called EU Inc. Let's see if it's already inevitable, but they just said that last week at Slush, I think. Yeah. But yeah, thanks for the amazing insights. I think it's really cool to see how we're getting over the AI first bump of excitement and getting into more like realistic territory, and then seeing how there are actually benefits like coming from both ends, right? Digital twins are good at this, AI is good at this. And if I put them together, I get really powerful synergies.
Yeah. And I think the biggest thing, again, if for anyone out there that's listening that is exploring this space, this is something that surprised me too recently, was how so companies have to, like, they're all interested in how they can leverage AI in their workflows. But the problem is that these companies are also trying to keep the lights on and keep the doors open and keep their employees paid. So they're just grinding away as business as usual, trying to be as productive as they possibly can. And for the most part, they don't have the time or the ability to investigate these like AI tools. And honestly, they're just feeling overwhelmed by the releases of things and how many new workflows are. It just feels every day. So if you're looking for work, if you're a student, I'm hearing more and more companies talk about how they're looking for innovation from outside and and this is different than when I started in 3D, which was, okay, we've got this established pipeline. There's a skill set that we need for this. You just do that, and then we'll slide you right into the pipeline. Just prove to us that you can do the thing that we already know how to do, and we'll put you in. Now the world is, we don't know how to do any of this. Instead of, we have this predefined job title that we want you to find, that they're looking for people who are doing creative, innovative things with 3D, with AI. And they're like, oh, if we hire this person, then we hire this knowledge, and then we can bring in this workflow into what we do. I'm seeing a lot more of that than I've ever seen in the past, which is really cool. Like companies are looking for ideas from their new hires, and especially from like college students and stuff that that was never available before. So it's pretty cool.
Yeah, things move so fast, right? How can you tell what a job's going to look like in 5 years?
No idea.
But yeah, perfect. That just emphasizes how important it is to have a certain skill set and just be open-minded. Yeah, thank you so much, Michael. I think those were a lot of really great insights, and I really enjoyed the conversation and learning more about like the synergies between digital twins and AI, and also your journey from entertainment to 3D for enterprises. I'm really looking forward to following more your work at Adobe and with the 3D artist community. And yeah, thanks again for having been on the podcast.
Oh, thank you very much for having me. Like I said, I've been inspired by the podcast that you've released so far. And I said to do this before, but I literally have a meeting with one of your past guests coming up next because I made the connection after listening to your podcast about it. And I got so excited that I reached out to them. And it just so happened that the timing aligned with right after this podcast. Very excited. Thank you for doing the work that you're doing. I think that you've been incredibly inspirational, and I'm so glad we were able to connect.
Very happy. Thank you so much. That's amazing to hear. And I hope we can make more connections in the future, maybe also with the listeners of this episode.
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. And for anyone who's listening, find me on LinkedIn. I'm on there. Reach out to me. I'd love to hear if you have any thoughts.
Thanks again, Michael.